What's up, everybody? Matthew here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about female ordination. I know that's a controversial topic. I'm in the PCA now, and I used to be in the EPC. And one of the differences between the two denominations, and frankly, one reason I'm glad I'm in the PCA, is that the EPC does ordain females as pastors, elders, and deacons. PCA does not. That's the position I hold. It's called complementarianism. Those who hold that females can be ordained, that position is called egalitarianism. Now, as it happens, I used to be on the committee that would examine people for ordination, either to become pastors for the first time or to transfer their credentials into our presbytery. And this question came up all the time. It was controversial, and I think a pretty good litmus test as to how a person interprets the Bible. So when I was on that committee, or when I was just at on the presbytery floor doing these sorts of exams, I would always ask egalitarians, what biblical text most clearly and expressly proves your position that women should be ordained? Most of the time, the most common answer that came up was Galatians 3:28, which we're going to look at here in just a moment. And if they said Galatians 3:28, I would always ask a follow-up question: does that passage actually have anything to do with female ordination? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go over to this particular passage, and we're going to look at it here in context. So here we go, Galatians 3. It's actually 23 to 29 here. But before faith came, we were kept under guard by the law, kept for the faith, which would afterward be revealed. Therefore, the law was our tutor to bring us to Christ, okay? That we might be, and this is a key phrase here, justified by faith, one of Paul's favorite and key doctrines in the New Testament, especially Galatians and the book of Romans. But after faith came, we were no longer under a tutor, for you are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Now here comes the language that egalitarians would use to defend their position of female ordination. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And so the logic goes something like this: if we're all one, if there's no male or female, then therefore anybody can be ordained to the office. So what I would do is I would always ask a follow-up question. Does this passage then actually have anything to do with ordination? And quite clearly the answer, if we're honest, is no. What does this passage have to do with? This is a passage about salvation. This is a passage about justification by faith. And specifically, it has to do with the Christian's relationship to faith and the law. And so this language down here about male and female, unfortunately for the egalitarian position, does not defend or prove their position at all. This text in context does not have anything to do with female ordination. Now, there is a principle of prescription, which means do this, and there's also a principle of proscription, which means don't do that. And I think what we can do is we can actually prove the complementarian position by looking both at a prescriptive text and a proscriptive text. So let's go first to the prescriptive text. Let's go over here to 1 Timothy chapter 3, and let's look at 1 to 7. Now, this text does have everything to do with ordination. And by the way, there's another rule of hermeneutics or interpretation. Always go to the text that most directly speaks to the topic at hand. This is a faithful saying: if a man desires the position of a bishop, now let's just pause here and acknowledge that in our theology, a bishop is the same thing as an elder, okay? The word Presbyterian and the word Episcopos, those are used interchangeably here. So this is not some different office than the ordinary office of the minister. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband, okay, look at this, of one wife. So we're talking some gendered language here. Temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. This one's interesting because this is one competency character, whereas most of this has to do with ethics and morality. This has to do more with character, the character of the person, than their particular competencies. Not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetousness, one who rules his own house well. Now, we're noticing here a lot of pronouns, and pronouns, by the way, are part of the Bible. We can't just dismiss them because they're not convenient to our case. Having his children, there's another one, in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, etc. So it's pretty obvious here that when Paul is laying down the qualifications for the office of bishop or elder, He is talking here about a man. This is exactly what he has in view here. So this is a prescriptive text that men should be ordained as the officers of the church. Not surprising, really, because the priests were men in the Old Testament, the apostles were men. We could make all kinds of arguments about that. But let's go ahead and look then at a proscriptive text, one that has to do with females. Paul says, same book, different chapter. I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. And like manner also that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for a woman professing godliness with good works. Now, look at this text here. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. Now, I know that stings for egalitarians. I know that it's not their favorite text. I understand that. And many times what egalitarians do here is they'll say, well, listen, that was just a local issue. There must have been something happening in Timothy's situation, or in the case of the Corinthian correspondence, there's a portion that's similar to this in 1 Corinthians. Something happening localized in Corinth that Paul is responding to. However, again, we have to notice the context here. That's not the way Paul gives his justification for this. Notice here he says this, for Adam was formed first and then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. So Paul's answer here is not some sort of localized, particularized issue, but rather what Paul does is he points back to the creation as well as to the fall for his reason why he does not permit a woman to have teaching authority in the congregation. So there we have it. We've looked at a proscriptive text. 1 Timothy 2 teaches us not to ordain women. 1 Timothy chapter 3 is one example of a place that does teach us to ordain qualified men, not every man, but qualified men. And Galatians 3:28, the passage most commonly cited by egalitarians, at least in my own perspective and experience, has nothing to do with ordination at all. All right. Well, thank you so much for checking into this video. I do hope this was helpful to you. Love you lots, and we'll talk to you later.